I've found that nobody knows how to use SMGs in Apex properly, and it is costing them real games. So today I'll teach you how to use every submachine gun in Apex Legends, all the way from the stats to smaller tricks for every gun to optimize your performance, starting off with the Alternator. The Alternator is what I'd call the gateway or attachment slave for the rest of the SMGs, though that doesn't mean that it should be slept on, as its 16 damage per bullet at 10 rounds per second makes it very easy to control and deal a huge chunk of damage to unsuspecting enemies over mid-ranges. It starts off with 90 bullets off the ground and can be upgraded to 27 bullets with a purple magazine. It only has a raw damage per second of 160, but thanks to how easy it is to use, can stand its own against some of the more higher DPS weapons as well. As I mentioned previously, the recoil is very manageable, firing off with a trail that goes up and very slightly to the right before turning to the left after the middle point of the magazine. Unlike other weapons in the game, the bullets will alternate from the right to the left ever so slightly as it fires from two separate barrels, hence the name Alternator. As for its model, the Alternator doesn't really have any insanely strong pay-to-win skins that clean up the model, but I would look into getting the LED Res or Galvanizer to clean up the sights a little bit, and just make it overall cleaner and more pleasant to use. Avoid skins such as the Haymaker that just make the Alternator much bulkier for no reason. It benefits from a sight as does any other gun, but you can get away with using the iron sights. These stronger iron sights combined with the high stock magazine count and easy to control recoil makes it a very good weapon to use if you have to fight off drop. By using a reload cancel, which is when you start a reload, then swap back and forth between your guns as soon as the ammo counter in the corner updates, you can save around 200 milliseconds off of a reload. It's nothing groundbreaking, but definitely good to know if you have to reload in a pinch. It's also worth noting that reload cancels are affected by what stock you use on the gun as well as on your secondary, but the stocks act as modifiers, and all weapons have different amounts of which they can be reload cancelled. The Alternator's hitscan range ends before 50 meters, and while there is a bit of a bullet travel time, there's not much of a bullet drop up to 150 meters. Past that, and you're way beyond the Alternator's effective range. The Laser Sight is a new attachment that came out recently which tightens your hipfire spread the higher level it is. With a purple laser sight, you can easily get away with hipfiring your enemies up to 20 meters away, and without it, you'll have to get a little bit closer, but you definitely shouldn't sleep on hipfiring with the Alternator, or I guess any SMG for that matter. As with any weapon, using a laser sight seems to give you something more of a controllable recoil rather than it going haywire, so try adjusting for your recoil when you're hipfiring for an even more devastating effect. If an enemy is farther away or you don't have a laser sight, you'll want to aim down sights. Aiming down sights with any SMG won't slow your movement down as many other weapons, but it's still a little bit more than a pistol would. As for power spikes, the Alternator hits its first power spike when you pick it up in the early game. It benefits from a good sight or laser sight, but nothing that really spikes its performance that hard. That being said, it certainly improves from a larger magazine, as a purple magazine has the potential of almost one-clipping two fully kitted enemies. That means that the value from having an Alternator spikes at the early game and then rapidly falls off as you head into the mid and late game. So despite being a strong weapon off the drop, I'd keep it around to hold attachments, but then swap it for any other gun or SMG heading into the mid or late game, for example the Volt SMG. This bad boy has been the go-to SMG for many users for a long time now, with a 15 damage per shot and slower fire rate of 12 bullets per second, coupled with a pretty controllable recoil. And even though its bullet travel time was nerfed recently, it's probably the best SMG to use for mid-range as well as close-range beams on account of it being an energy weapon. The stock Volt only comes with 19 bullets in the magazine, which is just about enough to one-clip one enemy, but can be upgraded all the way to 26 with a purple magazine. It comes with a damage per second of 180, with a potential of 390 damage per purple magazine. Again, the recoil is pretty easy to control, starting off with a light pull to the up and the right and then turning back to the left at the halfway point. All you have to do is pull down and to the right, and after 11 bullets or so, start pulling to the left. But you might be better off firing off bursts instead of mag dumping enemies on longer ranges. At the moment, there aren't any pay-to-win Volt skins, but there are some pretty distracting pay-to-lose ones, such as the Dreamweaver. I'd recommend sticking to the default skin in this case. You can also reload cancel with the Volt, but the benefit is less than 100 milliseconds, and seeing as reload cancelling adds a little bit of risk in case you mess it up, I just don't recommend reload cancelling with it. But try reloading with one or more bullets left in the magazine, as pulling like the slide in a full reload wastes a lot of time. The Volt has a hit scan range that extends up to 70 meters with a very fast bullet travel time and minimal bullet drop over 400 meters away, with the drop barely being noticeable up to 200 meters. As such, you can get away with a 2x sight on it, but it does make it a little bit awkward to control the recoil or firing it off in close range. Just like most SMGs in this video, the Volt can be equipped with a laser sight. The purple laser sight allows you to deal solid damage with hipfire up to 20 meters away, and without the laser sight, you don't want to hipfire an enemy any farther than 10 meters away from you. Aiming down sights with the Volt is just fine, and it doesn't really slow you down, and thanks to its pretty good iron sights, you don't really need any type of additional sight to see what you're shooting at. So, when it comes to power spikes, just like with the alternator, the Volt hits its first power spike the second you pick it up. It is an incredibly strong gun off of rip, especially when you're fighting against other enemies that don't have the best weapons or armor. It also hits another power spike when equipped with a laser sight, as this allows you to hipfire a lot more accurately and give you a lot more versatility over all ranges. The Volt is good into the mid or even late game since you can equip a digital threat on it, unlike many other mid-game weapons with the same effective DPS. Next up is the Prowler SMG, which received a pretty significant change in the most recent patch, the Spellbound Collection event, so we're going to use the stats from that patch and onwards. The Prowler is a burst-fire heavy submachine gun that fires 5 bullets per burst, dealing 15 damage per bullet for a total of up to 75 damage per burst, and if fired as fast as possible at a DPS of about 179. This means that if you hit every bullet, you could kill a target with red armor in as little as 4 bursts. Keep in mind that the stock Prowler only comes with 20 bullets in the magazine, meaning you're only going to have 4 bursts to work with. Upgrading to purple will give you 35 bullets, which means you will get 7 bursts to work with for a potential of 525 damage per magazine. Firing the Prowler a little bit slower and allowing the recoil to reset makes it a lot more manageable. All you need to do is pull down, because all you need to do is pull down. But if you're spamming the trigger, it will start pulling a lot more aggressively to the left and then to the right. And if you're fighting over mid to longer ranges, it's definitely worth it to wait that extra moment to reset the burst before firing again. Abusing the burst reset allows you to deal a large punch of damage to enemies pretty far away, up to 100 or 200 meters in a near instant. As for its model and skins, the Prowler is on the bulkier side, and using the iron sights is not the easiest feat. There aren't really that many pay-to-win skins either, but some users have reported that they find it easier to use the Dark Fright skin, which removes the screw from the iron sight and makes it a little bit cleaner. Some skins, like the Lightworker, add these prongs to your model, and they're so bad that the prongs not only get in the way when you're using the iron sights, but they actively get in the way when you have other sights equipped as well. The iron sights make hipfiring more favorable than aiming down sights, especially in the early game, but more on that later. Reload cancelling the Prowler with a bullet left in the magazine will save you about 400 milliseconds, about half of a second, so that is something I definitely recommend. The Prowler being a heavy gun will impact the bullet's trajectory, which is on the slower and heavier side. I wouldn't recommend using the Prowler seriously past a 50 to 100 meter range, but it really shines when you get real up close and personal. Without a laser sight, you can burst down an enemy within 20 meters, and with a laser sight, you can burst them down up to 40 meters away. That being said, due to the nature of burst weapons and its low damage per second, it is a pretty risky gun to use. You only want to use the Prowler if you get close enough to your enemy where you can spam your bursts and have good enough of an aim to actually hit consistent shots. So if you can't hit all shots in the burst, it's not really worth using the weapon. However, if you can hit these shots, you can benefit a lot from playing cover, as you can burst the enemy with a lot of damage, peek behind cover, and then peek out again when it's time to shoot again, to minimize how often they can shoot back at you. Aiming down sights will make your Prowler more consistent across all ranges, but again, if you're really close to an enemy, you're gonna be better off hip firing so you don't get the aim down sights movement penalty. The lack of bullets combined with the poor iron sights on the stock Prowler makes it a little bit iffy to use straight off drop, but if you do, make sure to hip fire. The Prowler hits a power spike with a decent sight, and another with a decent magazine, and finally another with the laser sight, and actually another one with the stock, because every attachment makes up for the Prowler's weaknesses. So it kinda just keeps getting better as the game progresses, but it stagnates in value around the mid to late game mark. Moving on, we have the R99 SMG, an incredibly fast RPM submachine gun with one of the highest DPSs in the game. It only deals 11 damage per bullet, but fires at an incredible 18 bullets per second, totaling in at a damage per second of 198. This fast fire rate comes at a cost, specifically most of your light ammo, but it also means that the stock R99 isn't always enough, as the stock R99 only comes with 20 bullets in the magazine, which can be upgraded to 28 with a purple magazine. The stock R99 can deal up to 220 damage for the full magazine, assuming you hit every bullet, but that's a rare feat with how strong the recoil really is, because the recoil hits pretty hard, which is to be expected with a high RPM weapon such as the R99. It starts pretty easy with a slight pull up and to the right, but starts swinging back towards the left and then making several turns towards the end of your spray. Moving on with the model, the R99 has a terrible default iron sight with a lot of skins that somehow make it worse. But thankfully, it also has a plethora of useful pay-to-win skins. Some skins, arguably the best ones, are locked behind a battle pass that is no longer attainable, but you can still get some really good iron sights with skins such as the Outlands Avalanche or the Killswitch. Owning these pay-to-win skins makes the R99 a lot more valuable in the early game before you can find yourself a sight. Tactically reloading with the R99 is already incredibly fast, and you can shave off an additional little bit of time under 100 milliseconds by reload cancelling. But I'm gonna make the case here that it isn't worth it with the R99, as there's a big risk of you messing it up and getting a longer reload instead. The R99 has a hit scan range under 50 meters or so and falls off significantly after 200 meters, but even if you control the recoil very well, you won't see much use of it past that range anyways. You can hip fire with the R99 up to about 10 meters away from your target and up to 20 if you use a purple laser sight. As I mentioned previously, the R99 is immediately good on drop and hits a massive power spike when you upgrade the magazine. It gains some benefits from upgrading the rest of the attachments and stays relevant all the way into the late game, though I would consider switching it up for the best SMG in the game at any point if you get the chance. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a KARR SMG. This beautiful weapon has been slept on ever since it was released, despite its high DPS and how good it is to your team's economy. It deals 13 damage per shot at a high 15.5 bullets per second, leading to the insanely high DPS of 202. The KARR comes with 20 bullets in the magazine and can be upgraded to 27 bullets with a purple magazine, with a potential 260 damage per magazine for the stock KARR and 351 if fully upgraded. To make things even better, you can decide whether you want to equip it with a light or a heavy magazine. Make sure to see what your teammates are using and maybe trade magazines with them if they find a heavy magazine but need a light one for their gun instead. In the same vein, the KARR SMG takes both heavy and light bullets. There is no difference in how the bullets behave. They don't affect your slow, they don't deal more damage, and they don't have any different trajectory, but having the option to carry both helps immensely with team economy. Consider picking up the same ammo type as your teammates so you can share your ammo with them, or carry the opposite to ensure that you always have enough. The main reason why the KARR never took off and became as popular was the recoil. The recoil is a bit strange compared to most other weapons, as it not only pulls up and to the left, but it pulls very aggressively, meaning you need to compensate that much harder than other weapons. After the initial burst, the recoil becomes a lot more horizontal, going back and forth. But despite being very difficult to use, it is consistent, and mastering the KARR's recoil will skyrocket your damage potential. The model is decent enough to use the iron sights with, and at the moment, the KARR doesn't really have any pay-to-win skins. Some users swear by the pastel skins, as they have a different shape to the front iron sight, but it has this massive chunk of visual obstruction getting in the way of the target. Much like with the R99, tactically reloading the KARR is already incredibly fast. You can get a small increase in your reload times with a reload cancel, but again, it's less than 100 milliseconds, and as such isn't worth doing because you will probably screw it up. The KARR follows most other SMG's bullet velocity and has a hit scan range within 50 meters. It starts dropping past 100 meters and starts dropping a lot harder past the 150 meter mark. It cannot be equipped with a laser sight and instead just has a pretty tight spread. It practically comes with the white to blue laser sights by default, and you can hipfire targets between 10 to 15 meters away without much issue. If anything, it's probably stronger than aiming down sights at those ranges, as aiming down sights slows you down as much as any SMG would. Due to the nature of the KARR, you get an immediate power spike when you pick it up. It is versatile and can be equipped along the course of the game, and it feels the same for the entire duration of the game, which allows you to get comfortable with it. There's a clear spike when you start upgrading the magazine, as this makes one clipping that much more forgiving. I wouldn't recommend anything past a one-time scope, and you definitely want a digital threat on it to make it incredibly viable in the final zones in the endgame. If this video was of any use to you, you're going to want to check out the complete guide for assault rifles, which is available on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.